Yeah, one bit of advice I give people when I'm coaching and before they go do their pitch is be humble. You don't have to, don't walk in there with a big ego, and don't walk in there like you know everything. You just state the facts, stay calm, build trust as quick as you can, credibility, um, and answer the questions. And if you don't know the answers, the best thing to do is say, I'm going to take that down. I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to get back with you. Follow up is a huge thing to build trust and confidence. And also, I'm listening to what you're asking me, and I'm going to write that down. I'm going to take a note, and I will get back with you. I don't have the answer right now.
Hey guys, welcome back to the MedTech 101 podcast. And today is quite interesting, really, because it touches on areas regarding business that perhaps a lot of startups will be thinking about in terms of how do they get their business growth correctly, how do they get their funding in healthcare correctly. So all these things are quite complex topics, but companies do need this to stay on the market and to stay alive. So today I'm joined with Ron Richard, who's an author of several books, um, but he also has a company called BOD Consulting, which is quite good in terms of what they offer. Really exciting services that really help companies to get across these hurdles. And there's many things we could have spoken about today, but that will be so long. But we just focused on this one particular topic, which will be touching on today. So without any delays to the introduction already, welcome to the podcast, Ron.
Yeah, gosh, Rodney, thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast. And I looked up some of your prior podcasts, and they're excellent quality. So, again, appreciate the invite.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind words. I think we've kind of come a long way in terms of video quality, audio quality, and now one thing we're kind of experimenting with is the short video form, sort of like content quality for TikTok and Instagram, which also has seen a bit of an improvement. But it's been a journey. It's been 2 years, and we've been working really hard to get to where we are today. So without delays, I mean, just to introduce yourself, Ron. Like what would you tell us about your background, leading to BOD Consulting and the book which you recently published, called Someday is Today. So yeah, what could you tell us?
Well, I've been in the healthcare industry since the early 70s. I worked in a teaching hospital as a respiratory therapist, and later on became interested in emergency medicine and became a paramedic. And that's where I got started with some of my first inventions, was actually working in a hospital and realizing that particularly as a respiratory therapist, you deal with people that are on ventilators and they're intubated and they have an artificial breathing tube in place. So they lose their ability to do something that we all take for granted, and that's speaking or talking like you and I are doing. And it's very frustrating for patients, and they're very anxious when they're on ventilators, when they can't easily communicate with their family, their doctor, or the nurses that are taking care of them. So I invented a communication board that had the most commonly used phrases on there that a patient typically would ask for, like I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm in pain, I need to use the restroom, things like that. And then there was an alphabet down at the bottom that they could actually spell out things that they were trying to communicate with the people around them. I eventually commercialized that with the help of the hospital and them allowing me to develop and invent this product in the hospital. And then what ended up happening is I sold it to a medical manufacturer who then went on to sell over 100,000 units globally. So that was my first invention and foray into getting an understanding of product development and how you get a concept or an idea, and then you eventually can commercialize that. And that's pretty much what my book is about. So over the past 30 years, I've launched over 40 products and generated sales of over $1.5 billion on products specifically in the sleep and respiratory field. And these are devices that help treat a variety or various different sorts of breathing conditions, including sleep apnea and COPD. But BLD Consulting, what we do is we help startups, we help mid-stage companies. It's a variety of different things that we can do, but we pretty much focus on devices, not pharmaceuticals. And our consulting includes sales, marketing, business development, go-to-market strategies, channel expansion, SaaS type business models. Basically, that's what I'm working on now, is launching a subscription as a service business that does telehealth and remote monitoring of Internet of Things devices that patients can wear to look at blood pressure, diabetes, A1C levels, glucose, SpO2, and particularly sleep hygiene issues. And so that's kind of what I've been working on. And then the book you mentioned, Someday is Today, the impetus behind that really was a lecture I gave at Stanford University about 3 years ago. The audience was primarily clinicians and doctors. And the question was from the audience, you've had a lot of success, and I'd probably put some parentheses around that, luck. I've been lucky to meet the right people at the right time, get the right funding, the right amount of support, and from engineers like yourself and people that develop software and understand all the intricacies behind silicone and plastics and all the polymers that we use now in the medical field, which led to developing and inventing and then launching the products that I just talked about. But the book itself is a framework to take a person that doesn't have a lot of knowledge or background in business and help them get from concept to commercialization. So what the doctors and the clinicians were wanting to know is, I have a good idea, but it sits in my coffee cup on my desk. How do I get it out of the coffee cup and onto the market? Because I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't think I'm an inventor. And I always tell people, I think you really are an inventor and you probably are an entrepreneur. You just haven't, unpeeled that part of the onion yet, or that layer of the onion. But let's talk about your idea and let's see if we can make sense of what that would look like if it was on the market, and what problems are you solving with your invention or your product.
Nice, nice. I thank you very much for that. And I think it's quite inspirational. It's been a journey, a lot of years in there, a lot of experience. But one thing that you mentioned that really kind of um, like impressed me, and I'm sure it impressed a lot of other people, is the how, for example, how much energy or how much muscles take part in just us being able to talk. And sometimes it's things we take for granted that sometimes when you find yourself in hospital that you really wish you could just do. So like something like a communication board really is something that's really important, allows people to feel heard, express, to be able to express themselves when they can't. And I think that's really amazing, Ron. So yeah, so congrats for that. I know you sold it, and I hope like many people listening, that they kept you on the royalties out of the 100,000 units that were sold. So at least, and I'm sure they did. But again, like the question is, even after that early success and everything, what kept you going was maybe the drive and passion in the industry, right? I think that's what really drives a lot of entrepreneurs to just continue basically persisting and continuing, like starting from scratch even after they've hit another milestone. So that's really great. And yeah, I just needed to say that. And just then also then moving on to the next point, which was like you mentioned business growth, helping people actually build their sort of like ideas they have when they're having coffee or in the shower, from taking from simply a concept all the way to like a full on blown business or something that's actually a tangible product on the market. Like what would you say are the steps that you've noticed that people need to take in order to make their ideas a reality?
Well, and I'll have to say, the word lucky, I'll bring it up again. I was pretty lucky early on in my career to make mistakes that forced me to do more thorough planning in the upfront stages of a project. I had some projects that they were over budget. They went on too long, and it was because I probably didn't go out and ask the right questions or talk to the right people or do the right focus groups. But long story short is, preparation and planning with your business and your idea, your invention, is so critical and it's so important. I think there's two or three main areas. One is we're in such a litigious society anymore. Make sure your invention is bulletproof in terms of the patents. Make sure you work with a patent attorney that understands how to search for, particularly if it's a medical device, the medical patents that are out there. So you're not infringing on something. I had a client I was working with once, and we launched their product, and they had told me they had done a thorough patent search. But about 6 months later, after the product was on the market, they received a letter from a competitor and they were actually sued. Luckily, we were able to do a cross licensing agreement because there were features on the one product that were not on the other. And both companies wanted to survive in the market. And really, when it gets down to it, avoid a bloodbath in terms of spending money and on attorneys versus let's spend money on sales and marketing and make money. And so they both could coexist, and they had their own sales forces, they had their own approaches, their own marketing, and they went off and were able to each successfully launch that product. But that's number one, is do a good patent search. Number two is have a business plan that includes everything you can think about in terms of the sales, the marketing. Put those costs in there because something you mentioned early on in our discussion here, money is the lifeblood of a startup. You have to have capital in order to exist and in order to make prototypes, make just buy materials. You don't have to rent an office or anything anymore. You can do a lot of stuff via virtual meetings. You have to have the right team. You have to have engineers that understand what you want to build. And in that respect, and you being an engineer, you know this, the best products you can work on are from a specification that's really like very precise in terms of describing what you're making, so you don't have to guess. You don't put a lot of guesswork in it. Or, okay, we're
Yes.
on the 10th prototype. Is this what you were thinking? It's like, no, it doesn't really work like that either. So now you're on number 11 and number 12, and all this time you're spending money. Your capital and your burn rate is always going to be something you've got to be conscious of every day. And so time is money. So that's important. And then the thing I said earlier on, what problem am I solving? And does this problem, is it really something that's bothering me, or does it bother a lot of doctors or a lot of clinicians? And is it something that affects a large population of people, patients? So if you can answer those basic questions, probably something also in my book that's important to understand, you start talking about your product to investors. And one thing I'll warn doctors and clinicians, don't talk too much. You should have a 30-second prepared elevator pitch that's not going to bore them. And it's like you mentioned earlier how things have changed the last 2 years with videos. People now have short attention spans. They want a TikTok video, they want a 30-second YouTube video, how to be quick. And that's kind of what, when you're in a meeting with investors, a lot of them have broad experiences and backgrounds, but they may not know hardly anything about what you do. Like you're a neurosurgeon, or you're an epidemiologist, or you're somebody that deals with kidneys or whatever. Your invention specific to that population of patients. Try to keep it simple. Try to do problem solution. Here's the problem. Here's what my product does to solve the problem, and this is basically kind of how it works. And this is the concept I have to get it to market, and leave it at that. You can go into more detail if they ask questions, but the first 30 seconds, what they're looking at is who's presenting and what's your background and why are you here, and do you have the background and the authority for us to invest in you. They're investing in you, and then your team. Who's your team behind you? And they're investing in those people, but first and foremost, they're investing in the person that's doing the pitch.
Well, nice. I think that's really quite insightful, really. And I jotted down some points you mentioned. I always do that when I jump on this podcast episodes, because this also serve as a way for me to learn new things. And that's one thing I love about the podcast. And but one thing that you really also mentioned, which I'll also be would dig deeper with you into, is like sort of like the raising of funding, because as much as you have a business idea, yes, you got the business plan, you got the invention that's bulletproof, you got the elevator pitch that's super concise and articulated. um the other elephant in the room with all of this is funding, because sometimes people have this idea everything is great, but you need a couple of $1 million to get it started. So how do companies, start sort of like working to raise funds in like healthcare, basically?
Yeah, a lot of the inventors I work with, they do family and friends first. So they go out and they talk to people they know, and I call family and friends, and they do the 30-second elevator pitch. And the family and friends go, "Well, this sounds really good, Dr. Joe. I think I could put some money into this." Be prepared then to follow up with the stock that I'm offering is in $25,000 blocks or $10,000. And so let's say your goal with your family and friends is to raise $200,000, and you easily reach that mark. Now you have to have a use of funds. What am I going to use this money for? So you can tell people I'm going to be building prototypes, I'm going to be doing some testing, I'm going to hire a couple engineers, but within a year and a half, I should be ready to really move forward with this project. But we will need more money than just 200,000. And you brought up 2 million on general and on average for small projects anymore, because of the cost with the FDA and filing patents and doing prototyping and doing clinical testing and all the things that go along with getting a product to market. You're going to spend between $2 and $4 million, and it'll probably take 2 to 4 years. So that's my 2-4. That's my 2-4 formula. 2 to 4 million, 2 to 4 years. If it goes beyond that, you're going to be looking at having to raise money through other means. So in my book, I actually go through. But we talk friends and family. Get your initial investment. That's usually easier in issue stock options, or it could be a bridge loan. There's different ways to do it. Once you get to a certain point, though, you're probably going to need more money. And then I talk about going to venture capitalists, and that's when you can probably raise, and typically the boutique kind of places do 1 million to 5 million placements. That typically gets you from concept to startup. You got more of a formalized now structure in a business and a company, and then after that you start making sales, hopefully. And once you hit about 10 million, it's easy then to go out and look for private equity firms to invest. Now you're on a runway to go up to 10 to 50 million to 100 million in sales, and you're going to be dealing with private equity firms. So the structures of family and friends, uh, venture capital, private equity, they're all different. And what I advise, I talked about patent attorneys. Find a good business attorney that knows how to write contracts and can help you issue stock and deal with any kind of legal issues that go on with those three types of investor groups.
Nice. And just additionally to that, like most people quite well people feel quite intimidated when it comes to venture capitalists, and they feel like they're untouchables, they're unreachable. What would your advice be, like over your years of experience, when it comes to, okay, now trying to get to the next step where you've done friends and family, maybe you've got a small office, something a little bit smaller, and now you're trying to get into the big leagues, with the venture capital firms, like, do you know what perhaps like tricks on how to impress venture capitalists that people perhaps listening could take into consideration?
Yeah, one bit of advice I give people when I'm coaching and before they go do their pitch is be humble. You don't walk in there with a big ego, and don't walk in there like you know everything. You just state the facts, stay calm, build trust as quick as you can, credibility, um, and answer the questions. And if you don't know the answers, the best thing to do is say, I'm going to take that down, I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to get back with you. Follow up is a huge thing to build trust and confidence. And also, I'm listening to what you're asking me, and I'm going to write that down. I'm going to take a note, and I will get back with you. I don't have the answer right now, because venture capitalists, some of them can be pretty darn mean. I've found in meetings, and they can poke the bear and try to make the bear get angry, and try to see who am I dealing with here? Are they are a crazy person, or are they stable? Are they cool about things? And they push your buttons. So just be
Yes.
prepared to, and there could be three or four of them in the room, and you're by yourself or you're with your business partner or whoever. Just stay calm and cool, and don't let them, throw you off track.
No, thank you very much. And yeah, that makes sense. And now that at least now we've set like the basis of like building the business from idea to a product that's marketable and also raising funds. Obviously the next question is like what are the biggest hurdles when it comes to business growth, for example, besides like looking. I know you already mentioned a few of the things regarding like you need to have like an attorney who's actually really good, but do you think there's other hurdles that are generally happening, for example, like economic factors that perhaps people can't control, and how do they better prepare for those, or other common hurdles that companies do that really affect their business growth besides like obviously like a good lawyer, or like having a bad pitch, or like having an invention that's not as solid? What else would you say to that?
Rodney, you're asking a
Mm.
question that's so timely right now,
Yeah.
and it's all based on, I'll
Yes.
say the T word, tariffs. And
Yes.
one of the things you got to consider when you're starting out and you haven't gone too far with your project, you got to consider the tariff question and making something in the country you live. And are you going to export it? And what are the tariffs, and how much is that going to affect your cost of goods? And that all rolls into your business plan. If you're going to be global versus local, and that leads me to also talk about, you've got to have a solid banking relationship, so you can go to a bank, and if you need to borrow money on a revolving line of credit or something like that, because emergencies come up, things happen with your company that are unexpected, so you've got to have a good relationship with a bank if you need some immediate cash, between 100,000 and let's say 500,000. So that's another component or part of it, aside from the fundraising part of it. And then you add in the tariffs, and where are you going to manufacture? What are your manufacturing costs? And I had a podcast actually 2 weeks ago, and it was with some doctors, and the clinicians on the phone go, "Well, what if I don't want to have a big company? I have a busy practice. I'm a doctor. I'm working full time at a hospital. I do have a good idea. I've got an invention. What are the other options?" And I said, "Then you go for licensing, and you work with a manufacturer, and you approach some different companies. Once you get your patents issued or your patent pending, you've got a non-disclosure in place, and you trust the company that you're approaching. Go for more of like a licensing deal and become a consultant or an advisor on the project with the company that's interested in getting this commercialized for you. So you don't have to go full blown, I'm going to hire employees and I'm going to be the boss and the CEO and all that stuff. But if you've got an active medical practice, and you still want to do that, at some point some doctors go, I don't want to be going to the hospital and doing rounds or taking calls on the weekends. I'd rather still, have some medical practice in place, but I'd rather transition over into the business world."
That makes sense. Makes sense. And yeah, I guess I'd actually like sort of like kind of forgotten a little bit of that about the tariffs and how much it is a huge impact, because a lot of companies, particularly in MedTech, tend to have some sort of like contract manufacturers, and some of them will be in China as a way to cut costs, because by the time you get to market, you're just so desperate to get some of your money back because you've spent millions with the FDA, with everything
Hmm.
else. So right now, most of those companies will be at like, will be feeling the heat at the minute with the tariffs, what it means for their
Hmm.
business, what it means for their profitability. And then obviously the other part which we were talking about today is also like the sort of like raising funding in healthcare. Like, what would you then say are the barriers, like, or the hurdles that perhaps other people face when it comes to like raising capital? Because again, like you just said, money is key. That's how you get to market. That's how you get the right R&D in place and everything, etc. So what would you say for raising capital?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles and the questions you're going to get from VCs is, how are you effectively going to market your product to your end user? And so if you're going into the hospital to sell a product, the cost of going into hospitals is much more expensive than long-term care or home care. So, and you also have to decide, am I going to have a direct sales force or am I going to go through distributors that are going to stock the product? They use their own salespeople. You do have to factor in profit margins are going to be less if you go through distributors versus going direct. But initially, a lot of companies try to find specialized distributors that are going to take your product into the call point that's going to be probably the hot spot to generate business. So that's one of the questions that you're going to be asked is what's your go to market plan? What's your sales strategy look like? What's your marketing budget? How are you going to educate the market about your product? Are you going to do it purely on the internet? Are you going to do it in print ads? Are you going to do a digital asset, sort of a email blast, things like that? And so you just got to be prepared to understand what's the most effective way and cost effective way to penetrate the market, because there's a lot of products out there and you're going to be competing for mind space of the clinician or the doctor, whoever's going to be wanting to try or buy your product. And without sales, I can tell you, you get in a pretty miserable situation with investors and your VC connections or whoever's loaning you money, your bank or whatever, and they'll be pressuring you all the time. What are you doing about sales?
Sure. Nice. And no, that makes a lot of sense really, because I think sometimes people, particularly when you're an engineer, I think most startups tend to have like just engineers coming to well, coming up with all these innovations and ideas, and but because as part of our training, we don't really get that much sales training, marketing. So it's usually we tend to have like just a product and say, you know what, this is what we have, guys. We need some money, and sometimes then you really have to train really hard or really educate yourself a lot more beyond your university training to understand the importance of sales and why people actually care about that, because sales is the deal flow is the lifeline of the business. At the end of the day, the goal is to make money. Even though you want to make a cool device, the goal is to make a really cool product.
Hey, Rodney, that's a great thing that you brought up. I want to share with you a story about some of my successes in developing products. And you said your engineering background didn't lend itself sometimes to understanding the sales and the marketing. So some of the most successful products I had put to market, I actually had engineers come in and meet with patients that were on products that we were working on and developing and ask them questions about what problems they were having with the current products. And it gave the engineers a lot better feel for these are real people that are using this product and these are the real life everyday problems they're having. And it gave them ideas on how to create even a better product. So I encourage clinicians, doctors, engineers, please try to understand what it's like to be a patient using the product that you're trying to invent and get on the market.
True, definitely. And I think that makes like a huge difference when you try to actually, instead of working from okay, how do I say it? Making an invention, understanding, putting users first, than making an invention and trying to force it on users. Because I think that's a
Mhm.
common mistake that tends to happen. We tend to try to create something and then try to force it on people, whereas it should be the other way around. Understand what people want and then create something that they want. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
Perfectly said.
Yeah, and yeah, like lastly, like one thing that I always like to ask on the podcast is, and I think this has become like a traditional question on this podcast is, like, with what you know and all the things you've observed in the industry, like what would you say like is the current state or like of the industry, like the medtech industry, when it comes to raising like like capital and having business growth versus where do you think it's going? And also feel free to share like how it was in the past, and like past, present, and future in terms of
Hmm.
these particular issues that we've been speaking about today.
Yeah, well, I think what's really forefront to me in my mind that's changed over the last couple years is there's a lot more scrutiny from the FDA, particularly on devices that patients are breathing on. A good example is a huge recall from a big company called Philips, and it's related to their CPAP machines. And a simple thing that they did 5 years ago was put foam inside of it to reduce the noise of the devices, and over time, the foam started to fall apart. and then it would get little fragments of it would get caught in the breathing tubes and blow into the patient's face or into their lungs, and they would develop some problems from that. So uh, there's a more keen realization that it's going to take longer in the testing now from the FDA to get a product to market. They really look at the safety in terms of toxicology, leachability, biocompatibility with all of the things that touch in the patient's breathing on, whether it touches their skin or they're inhaling or exhaling on the device. So that's one thing that's changed quite a bit. The other one that I talked about a few weeks ago was how AI is playing a role now, a more active role in trying to determine what is the best product that's going to best fit the needs of this particular patient's physical issues. And so there's a long way still to go with that, but it can supplement and I think help clinicians decide what's the best inhaler to use, or what is the best ventilator, or what's the best CPAP machine or mode on a device to use to best manage the patient and improve outcomes. Because patients obviously they want to feel better sooner and get back on the road or get back to walking, exercising, living a more normal life. And I think AI combined with the skills of engineers, clinicians, physicians, and whatnot can really benefit. And that's kind of the future. The third thing is I'm seeing a lot of a more interest in patients being educated through using wearables like watches, rings, anything that can provide them feedback about their nutrition, their exercise, and their sleep. Those are the three pillars. Those are the three things that most impact most of us. If we're not sleeping well, we don't feel good. If we're not eating right, we're going to get sick or we're going to get diabetes or whatever. If we're not exercising enough, just taking 10,000 steps, is kind of a routine goal. But the wearable market is finally getting to the point of where it's affordable. It gives good information via the apps that are being developed. And I think the ultimate goal of this is to really educate people better about their overall health and their hygiene.
Nice, nice. No, that's really nice, and yeah, that was quite insightful, and I think it made me think really about how much the standards, technology, everything has come. Of how, like, in every single time, one thing that's the common denominator here is basically increasing like patients like safety, no matter what, regardless of anything. So, and obviously, no matter what technology comes, everything, the question to be asked, how is this affecting the safety of the patients? And that question gets harder and harder as time goes by, as we learn from more accidents. And it's unfortunate that, like most engineering systems, that safety regulations are only put after accidents have happened and not the other way around. So that's how it is because the system is so complex. But yeah, thank you very much, Ron, for coming on the podcast. I think that was quite insightful. I found it quite exciting, and I'm sure the audience will love it too. So, and just to, before I let you go, where can people access your book? Where can people reach you in case people want to reach out to you and know a little bit how to get hold of you, or what, or how to contact you in general?
Thank you for that. So the title of the book is "Someday Is Today." Get your ideas out of your coffee cup and on the market. It's on Amazon. And my website that you can contact me is inventingstartstoday.com.
Nice. Nice. Thank you. And I'll be putting the links below in this description of this episode for people who are listening, and particularly those on the audio. You see in the description. Those guys watching on YouTube, you see it under the screen right now. So yeah, thank you very much, Ron.
And can I mention one last thing?
Definitely, of course, of course.
I
Yeah,
just
definitely. Go
I,
ahead.
I just published a new book, which is a little different. It's a murder science fiction book. It takes place in a hospital. It's also involves sleep technology, and it's called The Zenith Project. And it's also on Amazon. I just published that about 3 weeks ago. So it's a little different than what my prior book was about. But so if you can
Nice.
have people check that out, I'd appreciate it too. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. I'll also put that as well in the link below. So yeah, thank you very much.
Perfect.
I think it's quite exciting. Because is it like a science fiction book? Is it a fiction book? What exactly is it? Is it science fiction?
Yeah, it's science fiction and it involves sleep and dreaming. And so it's about a person that works in a hospital that's a sleep tech that does sleep studies, but on the side, he's a gaming programmer for gaming companies and he's a software coder or writer. And he discovers a way to actually record your dreams and replay them on a video. And he can actually see things that you're dreaming and thinking about, and it evolves to where he has a person that comes into the hospital that's been in a hit and run accident and they were killed, unfortunately. He hooks the machine up to them and he can actually see the car that hit them hit the person, and they he sees the last few things that a person sees before they pass away.
Wow, wow. I think I also need to read this book. So yeah, and I think thank you very much, Ron. And yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Appreciate it. Have a good day.